France might have left its colonies in Africa, but in reality, it has been controlling its resources, military, and politicians. It has placed an extensive system for that to happen, and its ambassadors in the Francophone African countries carry out this job. Not only France, but countries like Germany and the United States have been backing up France in its exploitation of African countries. Their ambassadors are basically the deal makers with a few of the African corrupt leaders. Once the deal is done, those leaders are offered funding and made to win elections. When they win, France and other former colonial powers get a green signal for whatever abuse they want to commit in African countries. The junta in Niger knew this, and once the coup was successful, it ordered in the strictest way possible that French, German, and American ambassadors must leave the country. If they don't, whatever happens next will be their own responsibility. But the French president, Emmanuel Macron, tried playing politics here. Perhaps he doesn't know how serious is the junta in Niger and what it can do. He said that he would not take orders from an illegitimate government. So, what is going on, and what the Niger Junta is planning to do with these ambassadors if they did not leave? Let's know the whole story. Recently, the French ambassador to Niger was ordered to leave the country immediately by the junta, which seized power in a coup on July 26. In the simplest words, it highlights the deteriorating relationship between the West African country and its former colonial ruler, France. This follows a pattern seen in neighboring countries like Burkina Faso and Mali, where military takeovers have been accompanied by growing anti-French sentiment, with accusations of French interference in their domestic affairs. Even the reason behind the coup was French involvement, so it became quite necessary to cut all ties with France and expel its ambassadors. The junta-appointed foreign ministry stated that the decision to expel the French ambassador was a response to actions taken by the French government that were perceived as contrary to Niger's interests. This included the ambassador's refusal to meet with Niger's new foreign minister. The move is a clear sign of the junta's desire to distance itself from France. But we are not talking about the French ambassador only. Niger is keen to kick out any Western officials who do not want to engage with the coup leaders but expect to be allowed to stay in Niger. The US ambassador and German ambassador were also seemingly ordered to leave the country. Being in denial, France has called for the return of President Mohamed Bazoum, who was ousted in the coup, and has expressed support for regional efforts to overturn the coup. It's because Niger's former president had deep ties with France. He cared more about French national interests than those of his own people. Hence, France wants him back and has also not recognized the junta's decision to revoke military agreements, emphasizing that they were signed with Niger's legitimate authorities. Well, France cannot think of letting Niger slip out of its hands, as it's strategically important due to its uranium production and its role as a base for foreign troops, including French and US forces. It has been involved in counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel too. The recent ultimatum given by Niger's military rulers to the French, German, and US ambassadors to leave the country within 48 hours reflects the escalating tension between the new regime in Niamey and several Western powers, as well as the economic community of West African states. France, which has a significant military presence in Niger, has been supporting ECOWAS's calls for the reinstatement of President Mohamed Bazoum, who was overthrown in the July 26 coup. Perhaps France is seeing this as its last chance to cling to Niger. Hence, Paris has rejected the ultimatum, stressing that the ambassador's authority comes from the legitimate elected Niger authorities, not the coup leaders. Niger's military leaders have sent mixed messages, including a threat to charge Bazoum with treason and warnings against intervention by ECOWAS. The situation is further complicated by the involvement of neighboring countries like Mali and Burkina Faso in potential military actions. While ECOWAS considers the use of military force as a last resort, the preparations for such action are politically sensitive and face resistance within the region. When France said that its ambassador would not leave Niger, and the European Union backed this decision, Niger coup leaders thought of another way. The Niger Junta decided to revoke the diplomatic immunity of France's ambassador. In other words, this means that the French ambassador has lost any type of immunity he enjoyed and is subject to all Niger's laws. However, France has categorically rejected the junta's authority and does not recognize them as the legitimate leaders of Niger. French President Emmanuel Macron has reaffirmed the ambassador's presence in Niger, despite the junta's demands. Macron also repeated France's support for Niger's ousted president Mohamed Bazoum, whom he commended for his courageous decision not to resign. Macron's statement was made during a major foreign policy speech to ambassadors in Paris and sent a clear message that France is willing to engage in every type of wickedness when it comes to Niger's resources, especially uranium. The junta's decision to cancel the diplomatic cards and visas of the ambassadors' family members is a further indication of their determination to pressure France. It is worth noting that France has a significant military presence in Niger, with around 1,500 personnel who have been actively involved in joint operations against jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. But now, after the French ambassador is expelled from Niger, French troops will be kicked out too. France now faces a challenging dilemma. Recognizing the military authority in Niger could help limit the reputational damage that France is facing in its former African colonies. However, doing so would also mean endorsing the junta's actions, which would be a significant departure from established diplomatic norms. While some analysts speculate about the possibility of France launching a military intervention backed by ECOWAS troops, the catastrophic implications of such a move, including regional conflict and increased anti-French sentiment, make it unlikely. It appears that France is still trying to cling to the influence it enjoyed for years in Niger. It made humiliating agreements with Niger, putting exploitative terms and conditions which Niger's leaders were forced to accept. That way, France secured control over strategic resources like hydrocarbons, uranium, and minerals in its former colonies. This meant that these nations, despite their sovereignty, could not fully utilize their own resource wealth for their development. French companies enjoyed privileged access to African markets. They were given priority for exports, and they were exempt from customs duties. This tilted the economic playing field in favor of French businesses. The agreements reinforced France's political influence in its former colonies. Leaders in these nations were often expected to uphold these agreements as a condition of their independence. These arrangements persisted long after the formal end of colonialism, and they remained a source of economic and political inequality between France and its former colonies. In the case of Niger, the country plays a significant role in providing uranium supplies to the European Union, which is used for generating electricity for millions of households. However, despite its uranium wealth, Niger faces challenges in accessing electricity for its own population. The majority of Niger's electricity comes from neighboring Nigeria, and this supply was cut off due to sanctions imposed by the Economic Community of West African states. As a result, villages and towns in Niger experienced blackouts, including the presidential palace. This showed how France could deprive countries of their resources and benefit from it, leaving the country struggling with its problems. Criticism of France's presence and influence in its former African colonies has been ongoing, but historically muted. Many Africans have harbored strong perceptions that colonialist practices and paternalistic attitudes never truly ended. This criticism spans the political spectrum, from right-leaning leaders like Nicolas Sarkozy to centrist leaders like Emmanuel Macron. The concern among France's authorities about rising immigration from impoverished African nations reflects the ongoing legacy of this historical relationship. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The term Françafrique reveals everything. It exposes the relationship between the Élysée Palace, the presidential residence in France, and the African elite. These elites, often referred to as assimilated, believed that their loyalty to France would lead to social acceptance in the metropolis. However, it was the agreement signed at independence that perpetuated a cycle of providing cheap raw materials to France's industrial centers, often extracted at low wages. This arrangement ensured that the French industrial machine remained functional and contributed to France's status as a first world power. The economic disparities resulting from this relationship are starkly illustrated in the case of uranium mining in Niger. Despite the substantial contribution of uranium to Niger's exports, the country received only a small fraction of the revenue generated. In 2010, the two Orano subsidiaries extracted a significant quantity of uranium ore from Niger, with a total export value of over 3.5 billion euros. However, Niger's share of this revenue was just 13%, demonstrating a significant imbalance in the economic benefits. Furthermore, tax exemptions and revenue generated by Orano dwarfed Niger's annual budget, emphasizing the disparity in economic power. While mining accounted for a significant portion of Niger's exports, it contributed only a small fraction to the country's GDP. This economic inequality is compounded by the fact that over 60% of Niger's population lives on less than $1 per day, resulting in a 174th position out of 178 on the UN Human Development Index. This is due to what's called a resource curse. Despite having resources, Niger could not exploit them, and France seized the opportunity. Despite possessing Africa's highest-grade uranium ores, Niger faced challenges associated with the resource curse. The resource curse refers to the paradox where countries rich in valuable resources often experience economic underdevelopment, political instability, and social problems. Niger produced 2,248 tons of raw uranium, contributing to cumulative production of about 150,000 tons by the end of 2019. The uranium concentrates are transported over long distances, 1,600 kilometers by truck to Parakou in Benin, and then 400 kilometers by rail to the port at Cotonou. From there, they are exported for conversion, primarily to Comerhex in France. To avoid exploitation, various Nigerian governments have sought to renegotiate the mining agreements based on the 2006 mining law, which aimed to increase royalty taxes from 5.5% in the 10-year license to a range of 12% to 15%, depending on profits. But this never happened. That's why we saw a coup in Niger unlike ever before. On July 26, 2023, Niger's government underwent a coup, resulting in the overthrow of President Mohamed Bazoum, who was later house arrested on charges of treason and corruption. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, issued an ultimatum to the coup leaders, threatening military intervention if Bazoum was not reinstated. ECOWAS member states suspended relations with Niger and closed their land and air borders with the country. This was a natural response as the world expected ECOWAS to do something like that. However, the coup in Niger was unlike ever before and gained support not only from inside, but also from Mali and Burkina Faso. Both of these countries are governed by military coup leaders, who jointly warned that ECOWAS intervention in Niger could trigger a military response from their states. On August 20th, General Abdourahmane Tiani, the main coup leader and self-declared head of state, outlined his roadmap in a televised address. It included a transition period of no more than 3 years and an inclusive national dialogue. He also reaffirmed Niger's readiness to defend itself if faced with military intervention. The junta has accused France, which maintains approximately 1,500 troops in Niger, of attempting to destabilize the country. Washington has closely monitored the crisis, due to U.S. military bases and political engagement in this landlocked Sahelian nation. Bazoum assumed the presidency in April 2021, marking the first civilian-to-civilian transfer of power in Niger since its independence in 1960. The electoral process was marred by controversy and disputes, including contested results. Bazoum, a philosopher by training and a prominent political figure for 3 decades, held key ministerial roles under his predecessor Mahamadou Issoufou, including in the Interior and Foreign Affairs ministries. However, he also had close and deep ties with France, which tells the entire story of the coup. That's why the Niger Junta said that he authorized a French strike on the presidential palace in Niger to restore the president to office. Niger has a history of military involvement in politics, with more military officials than civilians serving as president since independence in 1960. Niger has witnessed 4 successful coups and numerous attempted ones, including one just before Bazoum's inauguration. However, most of those coups were focused on bringing leaders into the office who could be loyal to France. Since France has a military presence in Niger, in addition to the U.S. military bases, they both use significant influence to choose who should be the president of Niger every time. Whenever they felt the president was thinking of setting Niger free from France and the U.S., he was replaced. However, this coup was different as it initiated the replacement of a president with deep ties with France. Unlike what the Western world is portraying, the coup in Niger is not being opposed, rather, thousands of people are supporting it. Hence, the coup the Western world knows about, which is focused on suppressing people, is out of the question. Rather, it's a coup against the former colonial powers like France, which have exploited Niger for over 6 decades after its independence. Recently, a large rally of tens of thousands of people in Niamey, Niger's capital, demanded the withdrawal of France's ambassador and troops, highlighting the increasing tensions between Niger's new military rulers and the former colonial power, France. The demonstrators, responding to calls from civic organizations hostile to French military presence, expressed their discontent with slogans like, French army, leave our country. Niger's military government, which took control on July 26, has charged French President Emmanuel Macron with seeking to maintain a neo-colonial relationship with its former colony. Macron, in contrast, has backed the ousted President Mohamed Bazoum and refused to recognize Niger's new rulers. France's ambassador, Sylvain Itte, remains in Niger despite a 48-hour deadline to leave, a move applauded by Macron. The protests in Niamey have been relatively calm and organized in recent days, but Saturday's demonstration saw an early and spontaneous gathering of thousands of demonstrators, taking authorities by surprise. Some protesters attempted to breach security barriers near the French military base, housing approximately 1,500 French troops. The military responded by reinforcing the area and warning against forceful entry. This clearly shows that the coup was not carried out by the military. The people of Niger wanted it. They want to go beyond what Niger's coup leaders are thinking, as they want all French troops and officials out of their country. The protesters' demands go beyond the withdrawal of the ambassador. They also call for the removal of all military bases in the country, highlighting concerns about terrorism and the effectiveness of foreign military presence in addressing the issue. Niger's military rulers view France's support for Bazoum as blatant interference, and the situation has strained relations between the two nations. Macron's commitment to engaging with Bazoum and his refusal to recognize the coup leaders further exacerbates the diplomatic standoff. The situation in Niger mirrors similar challenges that France has faced in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso following military coups. France's historical military presence and involvement in counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel region make its departure from Niger a significant diplomatic issue. France's previous forced departure from Mali and Burkina Faso highlights the potential for tension if France did not give up interfering in African countries. France has to be asked about what its troops are doing in Niger, why these colonial powers cannot learn to keep their troops in their own countries. Now, France is being humiliated in the worst way possible in African countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger. News has surfaced that France is in talks with Niger's coup leader for its troops' exit. From the perspective of the junta in Niger, forcing the French ambassador to leave is important for demonstrating strength and independence, particularly to its supporters. It sends a message that the junta is not willing to tolerate perceived foreign interference. Now, no matter what France does or says, it has to leave Niger sooner or later. This time, Niger coup leaders will ensure that France leaves nothing in Niger that it can use as an excuse and machinery to interfere in the future. Years of exploitation are enough. Now, France has to learn to take care of its internal matters and leave African countries. What do you think? Will the French, German, and American ambassadors leave Niger, or the Niger Junta will forcibly expel them using state police, showing that no matter whether it's the US or France, they have to follow Niger's order? Let us know what you think about Niger's sheer power in making Western countries change their thinking and policies about Africa. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.